Hello and welcome to the introduction to JavaScript. So let's understand what are the lectures you will understand in this section. After completing section, you will be able to understand the introduction to JavaScript, means understand what is JavaScript, how to use it, and what is the purpose of having JavaScript in your web pages. Then you'll understand how to embed a JavaScript, like how to embed JavaScript using internal, external, and inline. Then we'll understand how to write comments in JavaScript. We'll do some exercises, simple exercises to understand what is the main purpose of JavaScript and how to write them. Then we'll learn how to use JavaScript terminology. Like there are some words that we'll commonly use in JavaScript, so we'll go through those words to understand why and how to use them. Then we'll learn how to debug JavaScript code, because you cannot debug while you're writing your code. You have to write your code and debug them in the browser. So I'll show you how to debug a JavaScript code in your browser. Then we'll finally summarize this section by things to remember. Alright, so these are the topics we'll cover in this section. So let's start the section now. Hello and welcome to the introduction to JavaScript lecture. So let's understand what is JavaScript, then we'll try to understand what is the purpose of JavaScript and what kind of program you can write on the browser. Okay, in a simple word, JavaScript main purpose is to execute program at the browser. You write some program on the browser and then you define some events, like on a click of a button, on a mouse hover of something, and you basically change any element on the web page as well. So you basically have this scripting language available where you can change the elements on the page, or you can have some actions on the web page. Well, all this started in 1990s, where internet and HTML was booming up. People were putting their business online and then they were developing these websites. And in 1995, Brandon basically developed something called as JavaScript, and the main purpose of it was to change the DOM, that is the document object model. It's nothing but all your elements of the web page. When you say elements, it could be your tag, or it could be an attribute, or it could be your element, right? This, if you want to change that, then he developed something called a scripting, using which he tried to manipulate the HTML tags. That was his main purpose. And the main purpose of JavaScript today is to execute any kind of programs onto the browser. And there are many things that you can do with JavaScript. You can change the page data at runtime. You can validate the user by doing on the page, like when you submit a contact form, you want to validate whether the email ID is properly populated or not. Also, you want to show or hide things on a page based on the user action. You want to download and upload data in the background from the browser, animation effect. When sometimes when you scroll the page, the button basically fly from top or bottom or left. Those kind of animation effects can be handled with the JavaScript. You can also control the timer, like every 10 seconds you want to do a pop-up, or you want to do some checks on the web page. You can do that via the JavaScript. And basically, from a history point of view, the Brandon basically wrote JavaScript at Netscape. Netscape was again a browser long time back, and the original name of JavaScript was Mocha, and it was renamed to LiveScript, then again back to the JavaScript. And JavaScript now is basically adopted by many of the browsers. So all the browsers that you have in the market basically can execute JavaScript program. Well, JavaScript is booming a lot. Then the main reason is you get to execute everything on the client browser. Typically in client server technology, all the requests go to the server and server executes the code. But here in JavaScript, you run everything on the client browser. The languages like Angular are really getting famous because they get to run on the browser and they basically can interact with the server as well, right? So that's why JavaScript is very famous. Let me show you what is the main purpose of JavaScript and what JavaScript can do on the web pages. Okay, so I'll give you quickly a few examples. Let's say you want to perform some operations when someone click a link. So let's say you want to add 2 plus 5. You click it, there's a pop-up saying 7. Then you want to calculate an area, right? So there are a couple of things happening. When you click, there is an event, and based on that event, you're doing some calculation on the browser, and then you're displaying some data. Okay, and also you want to find an element, right? There is an element here, text box element. When you type something like this is JavaScript, there's a program in the background. When you click this button, the program gets executed. That is a JavaScript program, and it's able to capture this data from this text box and showing it in a alert box. So let's say you have a form, you want to capture the name and the email. you click submit, you can see name and email. So you're able to capture the text name and also the text field, right? So this is basically doing some kind of validation, because now you know what data has been entered by the user, you can now validate it. Alright, the next thing is you can also update the DOM elements, like this is JavaScript. You can see as I'm typing, right? So on the event of typing this text box, I'm changing the text of this label, right? This is basically happening on the events based on this text box. So you can basically manipulate the DOM, means you're changing the text of the element in the runtime. Okay, this is all handled by the JavaScript from the background. Alright, and you can see the power of JavaScript, right? It's all happening at the runtime, right? It's all happening on this browser. There's no control has been given to the server and server is giving a response. It's all the program that you write in JavaScript executes on this web page. Okay, that's the power of the JavaScript. So there are many cases, once you want to do some kind of operations on a click of a button, you can handle via JavaScript. You want to find an element and find what is inside the element, all the text, and then you want to validate, you can, when a click of a button, you can handle that via JavaScript. And also you want to capture the data before the form has been submitted and validate whether the data is correct or not, even you can do that by JavaScript. And then obviously you can find any element and then try to update that element data via the JavaScript. Okay, so there are many use cases. We'll have a lot of fun learning JavaScript, and we'll write all these programs and understand how this has been written in JavaScript. Alright, so that's all about the introduction to JavaScript. I hope you got a pretty much idea on what we can do with JavaScript. Okay, so let's start understanding by writing JavaScript code. Alright, so that's all for this lecture, and I'll see you in the next one. Hello and welcome to the lecture on internal JavaScript. So let's write an internal JavaScript and understand what is the syntax and how to start writing JavaScript. So let's go to our material folder. When you download, you will have all the source code available, right? So I'm just creating it now, so later you can download all this folder structure. Okay. So first lecture was introduction to JavaScript. So I'll start with the second section, that is internal JS. So we are aligned in terms of the folder structure as well. And I'm going to create a file here. Right, I'm going to open my, let's open brackets here. Okay, and then we'll change the folder here. Open folder, go to introduction to JavaScript. We'll select this folder, right? So we'll close all the other pages. So let's understand how to write internal JS. So how to write a JavaScript inside an HTML page. Alright, so what I have done is I have copy pasted the bootstrap for internal JavaScript. That's nothing but the plain HTML. There's nothing in it. There's a title, head section, and then there's a body section. In the head there's a title, and body we have h1, p, and UL items, right? This is the bootstrap page that we'll be using for most of the examples that we do here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this as bootstrap page. Go here, and I'm going to say bootstrap JS. So we'll, for most of the examples, we'll try to start from here. Okay, so how to write JavaScript. Okay, so let's start writing JavaScript. So the tag for writing JavaScript is script, right? It's literally the script that you're writing inside the web page. So how to write a script? You can start writing the methods. You can start calling the methods from the JavaScript, because we haven't covered the language syntax, so we don't know how to write, the variables, how to write constants, how to write, use the keywords, how to write functions and all those things. So we'll start very simple. We'll try to understand how to write a simple alert box, and then we'll try to understand this concept. This concept is not about writing JavaScript and understanding the language syntax, which is covering the next section. Here we're going to understand how to write internal, external, and inline JavaScript, and how to write comments and all those things. Alright, so first we will see how to write an internal JavaScript. So you can go to head section and start writing the script, and inside script you can write a method called alert. and now you can mention any message that you want. Okay, so we'll say this is call from head section. All right, this is done, right? So this is basically saying that when you run this program, please call the alert box. Okay, so let's save this and open this page. So see whether we can get this alert box or not when you open the page. And if you notice, we haven't called anything. It's automatically been called because the nature that we have written is we don't have a function and we are not calling it, and we don't have an event. When you click a button, you know, something happened. We just say please, you know, just show and call this alert box. And if you notice the alert box, there's no output is been printed. So understand that when you have in JavaScript, the JavaScript gets loaded first, and once the JavaScript gets loaded, then the HTML code gets loaded, right? So understand there's a difference between how the web browser interpret your JavaScript and the HTML page. So first thing is JavaScript, the second thing is basically your page. Okay, and it's not mandatory that you have to write only in the head section. You can even write in the body section as well. Okay, I'm going to show you that. So it's not mandatory that you should always write in the head section, like the meta and title should always be in the head section, but you can also write in body, and you can say same script and same alert but different message. Okay, let's run this. So this is called from head section, that's nothing but this one, and when you say okay, it's again not displaying any of these things, right? Understand this concept very well. The browser always execute the JavaScript first, finish off all the JavaScript job, then it go back and display the DOM elements, because you get the control of the DOM elements. You can manipulate it, and then you can display the new output that you want from the JavaScript, right? Now this is called from body section, text is been displayed here. Okay, after that the text is been displayed. So it's a good learning that you are understanding here, that you can use JavaScript to control how the output should be displayed, because the displaying is not happening first, the JavaScript is happening first. So you have the full control of the web page. Well, you get to change any of these elements from the JavaScript first, and then browser will decide how that data to be displayed on the web page. Okay, that's a very simple example on how to embed a JavaScript inside an HTML page, and I'll see you in the next one. Hello and welcome to the lecture on comments. So let's create a folder of comments. I will understand how to write single line and multi-line comments in JavaScript. Okay, and what I'm going to do is always I'm going to use this Bootstrap as a starting point, so that we don't have to write the HTML again and again. Okay, so now we can open up our comments, close this too. We can say comments. Okay, and what is a tag is called a script tag. Okay, inside the script tag you basically write JavaScript. Okay, so before we understand what is JavaScript comments, do you remember what is HTML comments? Yeah, this is HTML comments, right? So don't be confused between HTML comments and JavaScript comments. You cannot write this inside this script tag because this is HTML, and HTML should be outside this script tag. Okay, always remember that. And there are two types of comments. One is a single line comment. You see the color of the text as well. This is black color, right? This is something like a light gray color, right? So this is basically showing that this has been commented, right? And for multi-line comment you have more than one line. This is called as multi-line comments, where you can have multiple lines, line 1 and line 2, and then anything that you write here, let's say you write alert here, right? And you can see this alert will not be executed because it is commented. Okay, so let's execute this page and see whether we get the alert or not. Okay, so there's no alert is been triggered, and the reason behind is we have commented out. Okay, we have used multi-line comments to comment the alert box. Okay, and if you want to use single line comment, let's say alert box, that is the purpose of single line, is for documentation purpose, right? You want to write an alert and then you want to say what is the purpose of this alert, right? Then you can define it with your single line comments. So we can say welcome to JavaScript. Alright, so this is basically a single line comment, multi-line comment, and now you're just displaying some alert. Okay, if you execute, you will see welcome to JavaScript alert box popping up, right? And you see okay. Fine, so as simple as that, how to write a single line comments and a multi-line comments. And remember, don't get confused with HTML comments with JavaScript comments. Alright, so that's all about how to write comments in JavaScript, and I'll see you in the next one. Hello and welcome to the lecture on external JavaScript. So let's go to introduction to JavaScript, and we'll create a folder called external JavaScript. And we'll create a file here. So instead of that, we copy the bootstrap file and call it external. Alright, and we'll change this to external. Okay, what is the meaning of external? External means this JavaScript is not inside this HTML page, but it is stored it somewhere outside where you're including inside the HTML page. Alright, so how to create an external JavaScript? So what we can do is, typically this is a practice that we follow for all the websites. We don't write cascade style sheet and JavaScript inside the HTML page. We typically don't write it in the HTML page. We separate it out. For CSS we write .css. For JavaScript we write .js file. So we create a folder called JS, and we place our scripts file here. So we file it as scripts.js. So extension is .js. Okay, so now you have your file. You can open this file, and in this file you can typically start writing the JavaScript. Okay, there's no start tag and end tag. You can just start typing the JavaScript here. So you can say this is called from scripts.js file, right? Don't forget to add the semicolon at the last. So let's see how to embed that script.js file in the HTML file. Alright, so tag is the same. You can still use a script tag, and this time you have to say what is the type that you are trying to embed, and you can say it is text/JavaScript. You can put that in the quotes, and right, you have to mention where is the source file. The source file is in JS, scripts.js, and then you have to close the script tag. There's nothing you write inside the script tag. I don't write anything inside the script tag. You just open and close the script tag. The most important thing is you have to tell what is the type of this file, that is your JavaScript file, and where is the location of this file. Alright, so once you say that and go to your scripts.js, I've just written an alert here. Okay, don't worry of this script because you have to write functions and then you have to call them. That's why it's giving error. But we just wrote an alert here where this is called from script.js file. Okay, and we have also embedded the file inside the HTML page. Okay, and we have said to go to this folder and pick up this file and then embed that code here. Okay, so instead of this, at the runtime, what it basically does, it basically take this, put it here like this, right? Obviously it has a script tag on starting and bottom, right? You will have this like this. Okay, so instead of this, instead of writing like this, what we have done is we have removed that code and then we have embedded into a file, and then we have used that file to embed that JavaScript code in our page. And if you see script.js, it has nothing but an alert. Okay, so when we run our page, you should be able to see this alert. Okay, so let's run that. Okay, this is called from scripts.js file. Well, that's nothing from coming up from the script file. All right, And this is basically an external JS. Why is external? Because the file is not inside the HTML. It is stored somewhere outside, and then you're embedding that into the HTML page. And this is a standard practice that we do. We typically store all the JavaScript code in another file, and then we'll use that, embed that file in the HTML page. Okay. And why we want to do that? Because the JavaScript, maybe the JavaScript program is different than the person who's writing the HTML page. So it's basically help the programmer. The one who's designing the web page can focus on designing the web page, and there's a programmer who basically write JavaScript code. Alright, so basically it's a good practice for you to follow external JavaScript. So it's basically a good practice for you to write external JavaScript. Always try to write your JavaScript in another file and embed that in the HTML page. Alright, so that's all for this lecture on external JavaScript, and I'll see you in the next one. Hello and welcome to the lecture on inline JavaScript. So let's create a folder for inline JavaScript. So what we're going to do, we're going to use the BOOTSTRAP file, and then we're going to rename it as inline. Right, close all these things. Okay, and what is the difference between inline and internal? So internal, we saw we write it in the script like this inside the HTML page. This is called as internal. Inline means you write inside the HTML tags. Okay, so for this we're going to delete this HTML and we'll write an anchor tag. Okay, and we're going to say it's not going anywhere. And on click of this event, on click of this link, you want to call the JavaScript, right? This is called as inline JavaScript. Inline means you're writing inside the HTML tag. Internal means you're writing inside the script tag. External means you're writing external in the JavaScript file and then embed in the HTML file. So here are the three types: internal, external, and inline. So inline means you write inside the HTML tag, and we're using an event called onClick. So onClick means when someone click this link, this event get executed, and whatever you write inside this in the JavaScript will get executed. So obviously we'll write alert. There's nothing fancy here. I'm just writing an alert here, same alert box, and I'm ending it with the semicolon. Right, don't always forget semicolon. Okay, most of the times you forget semicolon and there will be an error. So on click event, I'm calling it alert box, and inside this it has some text, then I'm ending it with the semicolon. Alright, so let's execute this. I'm going to close all the rest of the pages. Alright, so let's open this page inline. And there's a link here, and what we said here is on this click event there's a alert box. Okay, so when you click this, you'll get this alert box. Okay, the main purpose I'm trying to show this example is inline JavaScript, how to write JavaScript inside the HTML tags. Okay, you can write the same JavaScript, okay, and you have to embed into any of the event. You cannot just say script, right? Doesn't mean anything, right? Script means he doesn't know how to execute or when to execute. Whenever you write it on an HTML tag, you have to assign it to an event. Well, that is about the onClick event. So when you click something, you get this alert. You can also have on mouse over, just to show you what is that event. On mouse over, save this, refresh the page, and you can see the event. I'm not clicking it, I'm just hovering on the link. Right, this event get executed. So understand how to write an inline JavaScript. You have to attach it to an event. Okay, when we go to event section, we'll learn more about this, but as of now understand how to write an inline JavaScript. Alright, so that's the example on inline JavaScript, and I'll see you in the next one. Alright, so we have learned about internal, comments, external, and inline. Let's do some exercises and understand more about how to write JavaScript. So we'll do some exercises here, and we're going to copy paste the bootstrap file. Okay, the first exercise is basically name items. Okay, when you click on the named items, you want to raise an alert. Okay, when you click on them, you want to have the name of this item. So how you can do that? You can have an ahref tag, and we can use on click event, and we can alert the item. Okay, and if you have noticed, you have starting with double quotes, so inside the JavaScript you can use single quotes. Okay, you can say item 2, item 3, 2 and 3. We have written a simple inline JavaScript as an exercise, and when someone click on this item, it will show you which item has been clicked. Okay, so if you click on item 1, so you say clicked item 1, on 2 you see item 2, on 3 you see item 3. Okay, alright, so that's one of the exercise. So let's look at embedding the JS exercise. So we say embed JS. We'll see how to embed a JavaScript. So we know we have to use script tag. So we're doing exercises just recapping what we have learned here. And you can write an alert in single or double quotes. This is internal JS. End it with a semicolon always. Alright. And what is the other way of embedding a JavaScript? You can have script type is equal to text/JavaScript, and you can point to the resource. Because we don't have a resource, what we can do, we can create a file here, scripts.js, simple write an alert, right, and then we'll embed this file. Okay, so this you will get two alerts. One is from this is internal JS, and another alert is from hello from JavaScript JS file. Okay, so let's run this program. So this is internal JS is basically coming up from this is internal JS. You say okay, then the script file, that is the external JS, will get executed, right? You say okay. Okay, so let's do a last exercise. So we're just recapping what we have learned here. Again, I'll use the bootstrap file. And this time we learn about the mouse over. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to use the same example. And instead of this event, we'll change it to on mouse over. Right, so let's run this exercise. So when you hover on the item 1, I'm not clicking it, item 2 and item 3. Okay, these are really important concepts that you have to understand. Okay, the most important concept is how to write JavaScript. That is the basic thing, how to write inline, internal and also internal, how to write comments, and then when you want to write comments inline, how to use with an event. Okay, this is very basic things and very important things for you to understand how this JavaScript get executed. This is the first step to understand how it get executed. In the next section, we're going to look at what is JavaScript, you know, what are the language basics, if condition, for loops and everything. But before that, you have to understand how to get them executed. Okay, how to write and execute them. Okay, so they are the simple exercises, but it makes you understand the concept very well, how to write all those the various ways of including JavaScript and executing them. Okay, highly recommend you do this exercise just for a hands-on purpose to get you understand with the basics of JavaScript. Alright, so that's all for this lecture on exercise with JavaScript. I'll see you in the next one. Hello and welcome to the lecture. So let's understand how to debug JavaScript. And if you see the code here, take any code, you cannot really add a breakpoint here. Like there's nothing to add a breakpoint to say, okay, wait it here, I will debug and step over it. So how do you debug this JavaScript code that you wrote in the HTML page? So that's what we're going to learn here. So we'll do an exercise, debug, and we're going to take bootstrap file and I'm going to call it debug. And we'll write some error in this program and we'll try to debug it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to write an external script text/javascript src is equal to, let's say, js1.js. Well, this file doesn't exist and I'm not trying to embed them in the HTML page. So how do you debug this and how do you find out that there's an error in your web page? Okay, that's what we're going to understand. So open this, first save the file, right? Save the file and then open this debug.html. Let's close all the others. Okay, so this debug.html, there's no error here, right? There's no error when you say, okay, embed this js1.js and you don't have that file there, but you're embedding it here and you're running it, there's no error, so nobody know what happened. There is a way to see whether we have JavaScript error or not. So for that, right click on the web page, go to inspect, or you can say Ctrl+Shift+I. Okay, you go to console, make it little up, and before you actually see anything, you see there's an error here, right? This is called as JavaScript error. Okay, when there are JavaScript error, you will see a red mark here with number of errors here. You can click this to see the error, or you can go to console to see that error. There are two ways. You can click this to see the error, or you can click on console to see this error. And it's clearly say fail to load the resource. And what resource is this? Is js1.js. And basically it's telling you the error that you have in your JavaScript. Okay, so let's say, okay, I find it out that this is not there, so I'm gonna comment this out. I'm gonna use HTML comments, and when I refresh, that error is gone. Right, good to know. So we wrote an alert, but somewhere the line we forgot to write T. Okay, so now you can see you forgot to write the right function name. So now it's able to catch that error. It's saying we don't know what is that ALER. It no alert, but you don't know what function is this. So it's telling you there's an error here, and then how to debug this, right? You know it's coming up from here, but if you have 1000 lines of code and it's tell you there's an error, right, you can basically know it from line 10. So if you see line 10, it's clearly showing line 10. Let's move this to body section. Let's refresh the page. It's saying 21, so that's from here. So it's able to tell you what is the line number, and you want to know detail on, show me where is the error, right? Show me where is the error. So when you can click this link, it takes you to that error, right? It's really taking you to that error. When you go to sources tab, so you're in console tab just now, it will go to sources tab and it will show you where is the error, and it can tell you exactly which point that JavaScript error is raising that error, right? So this is a very cool way to understand how to debug your JavaScript, and basically browser does all the validation for us and it will help you understand where is the error. All right, so there are two ways. One, whenever you see, when you load a web page and you see this error mark, means there is a JavaScript error. You click this, you will go to console, you click on the link, it will take you to the error, and now you know there is an error here. You can go ahead and fix that error, right? And you refresh the page, that error will be gone. right? So this is the way you debug your error. All right, so that's one way. And let's say there you want to put a breakpoint. You're not sure what is this. We just remove the T, we refresh it. So we know there is an error here, but we want to wait here. We want to add a breakpoint here. So you can just click it. You see there's a breakpoint in added. And now when you refresh the page, it will wait here, right? It will wait here for you to debug. Right now the program is not executing. You see it's loading it up here. Well, the program went into the debug mode. And now you can debug it from here. You can step over to the next function call, step into the function call, and then you can, if you click this button, you can just resume and finish off the program. So this is basically debugging of the JavaScript. You can go and click this and the error will be raised. And if you can fix this, you can go back to your code, fix this, okay, you come here and you want to still have that the line 21, you want to still have that breakpoint. Now you refresh it. Even though there's no error, because you put a breakpoint at number 21, it will still come back to this, and then you can step into the function or step over the function, okay. And you can see it's still in the debugging mode. To finish off and come off the debugging mode, click on this resume script execution, then basically finish off executing the JavaScript code, right? And how to delete it, double click, it will be done. Click, you can add breakpoint, click to remove the breakpoints. So there's many ways. You can have console to see the error. So when you go to source, you can add breakpoints and hold the control, and from there you can debug your JavaScript code. Alright, so here are some of the ways where you can debug your JavaScript code. So let's do a quick review on things to remember before we finish off this section. So first thing we have learned is JavaScript is used to write script that you can run on the client browser. And the reason why JavaScript is called as client-side scripting, because it runs on the client browser. So this is the ability that is given to us, wherein if you want to write a program and control something on the web page, you write JavaScript. And most common use cases of JavaScript, we have seen this in these examples, like data validation, update the elements on the page, show and hide things on the page, animation effect, and also timer. We haven't done the exercise on each of this item, which we'll be doing in the upcoming section of JavaScript, how to write this, how to control all these things. But understand from a point of view where if you want to write JavaScript, these are the things that you can do, and many more things, cool stuff on the browser. And also we have learned how to embed JavaScript in your HTML page, like internal, external, and also inline. Then we have looked at comments in JavaScript, like single line comments and multi-line comments. Then also we have seen how to debug JavaScript code via inspect option in the browser. Alright, so these are the things that we have learned in this introduction to JavaScript, and I hope you got a pretty much idea of what is JavaScript and how to write them. So in the upcoming section, we'll go deep down into the syntax and the language and do some scripting on the web page. Alright, so that's all for this lecture now. And welcome to the summary section of Introduction to JavaScript. So by now you should be able to understand the introduction to JavaScript, the main purpose and why and when to use JavaScript. Then we have seen how to embed a JavaScript in your HTML pages using internal, external, inline. Then you should know how to write comments in JavaScript. Also we have done some of the simple exercises with JavaScript which you should be able to do without seeing the examples as well. And also you have learned how to use the JavaScript terminology, so highly recommend you use this terminology when you talk about JavaScript. This will help to improve your JavaScript knowledge, right? And then also we have seen how to debug a JavaScript code. So when you have an issue, you know how to debug your code, right? Then also we have summarized this section with things to remember as well. Alright, so that's all for this lecture on this section to Introduction to JavaScript, and I'll see you in the next one.